to hear is that college is stupid. That's the point I guess I was trying to make.
That sounds like a future segment, if you ask me.
All right.
Agreed. Move on.
Let's move back to the point Jeremy was trying to make before I interrupted with my complete own personal agenda.
Hello and welcome to episode 52 of Bad Voltage, the first episode after our blowout, episode 51, which happened live in Fulda, Germany.
Lots of blowout in Germany, by the way.
There was blowout, there was lederhosen. We'll talk about that later. In this show, here in show 52, we're going to be talking about the delayed public license, an idea that some people, me included, have come up with for open sourcing your code later, getting paid for it now.
And once we're done talking about that phenomenally terrible idea, we're then going to review the System76 Serval Laptop / Workstation / Monolith. Jono?
And then talking about large machinery that expunges air, we're going to talk about Volkswagen and the recent screw up in terms of them cheating on their emissions tests.
What an immensely deft segue. That was not
impressed.
I thought it was
Deft.
amazing.
That's how we roll.
Effort.
That's how we roll here at Bad Voltage. Immensely deft. And now, Bad Voltage. So I'm guessing you guys heard about this recent, to use a word of Jono's, Volkswagen fracas, whereby they were caught.
Never use the word fracas, you bastard.
Where they were kind of caught.
That word.
You absolutely love that word. So Volkswagen was caught on their diesels basically cheating the system. So what the cars that are affected did, if they were hooked up to an emissions test, they would basically change their behavior to not how they acted on the road in order to pass the test. And I don't know if you guys think this is interesting. The one thing that it really struck me, and I guess it's something I already knew, but this really just kind of distills it very well, is that even from 10 years ago, the proliferation of software into basically every device enables things like this in a way that just wasn't possible previously in human history. And I think, and from a broader context than just Volkswagen, that's an interesting problem. And specifically to Volkswagen, it astounds me that at the world's biggest car manufacturer, they could set up a piece of software that's basically, if being tested, then lie. Which is basically what happened.
Before we go any further, because I think what you're about to touch on is profoundly interesting and very critical to discuss from a tech point of view and whatnot.
Well, we are a tech show.
I just would like to do a slight divergence here, because when I heard this story, it immediately made me think, here's an organization, a set of people, if you will, who are going about things in a particular way to do well on a test. How is that any different from, say, a student staying up late and cramming the night before an exam in order to do well on an exam the next day, when normally they would have bombed said exam? So they modified their behavior in order to pass said test. How is this any different than what students do? And should we be
because they
suing
didn't
every
actually
student in the world?
They didn't pass the test legitimately. It'd be the equivalent of writing the answers on their hand and then going in with that.
Right.
There's very specific emission rules. And part of why they wanted to do this is diesel engines work a little bit different than traditional petrol engines.
No.
So
they did pass the test legitimately, right? My understanding is they passed the test legitimately. They just wouldn't pass the test under the settings that are normally running when it's just out there on the road, right?
And that's the point. The regulations are not that you are capable of passing an emissions test. It's that you actually do not give out too much emissions. The test just stands in place to prove that your car normally runs like that. It's a substitute for testing it every 3 minutes while you're on the road.
What I really want to get to here is that college is stupid. That's the point I guess I was trying to make.
That sounds like a future segment, if you ask me.
All right.
Agreed. Move on.
Let's move back to the point Jeremy was trying to make before I interrupted with my complete own personal agenda.
So Lunduke University is not forthcoming, is what you're saying?
Probably not.
All right. Yeah, I mean, they cheated, right? I mean, that's the basic premise of this. In my mind, there is the spirit of something, and then there is the actuality of how people do things. And I think it's important to look at the spirit of what something is intended to be. And the spirit of this test, I think it's quite clear from the limited amount of research that I've done into this, that Volkswagen did not operate within the spirit of the test.
Well, it's not even the spirit. They didn't operate within the actual rules of the test.
Right. I'm being generous.
I can say this is not obeyed the letter of the law, but not the spirit.
Right.
They ignore both the spirit of the law and the letter of the law and all the other letters of the law. Yes. And doing this is just not on. It really is.
Now, Stuart, I'm sure there were some letters in the law that they were cool with. Let's not say all letters of the law.
Well, none of them were NOx.
But yeah, I mean, to me, what's interesting about this, fine, right? They cheated on the test, but this is hardly unknown we talked about this a little bit in Bad Voltage Live. I'm perfectly confident loads of other companies are doing it too, or at least they were doing it until VW got caught. But it's the way they've handled it since that I think's interesting. Right? Apparently, Michael Horn, who's the CEO of VW US, he said that he was made aware of a possible emissions non-compliance in the spring of 2014, 18 months ago. Right? And then did nothing about it.
No, wait.
And then,
wait. To be fair, car companies aren't used to having a rapid release model. They don't exactly operate under agile development processes where they pump out a new car every 3 weeks after a quick sprint.
No. And this comes back to the point that Jeremy...
I'm not trying to come to their defense. I'm just saying, they go slow.
This comes back exactly to the point that Jeremy was making. It's hard to have a rapid release schedule when in order to change something, you've got to retool a whole milling plant. But now everything in a car is not actually a piece of engineering at all. It's just a box with a microprocessor and some firmware in it.
No.
They can push out a new version of the firmware to fix this quite easily.
Yep.
But there's another thing at play here, and we see this all the time when these kinds of corporate snafus happen, is something goes down, and then the CEO either has to apologize or the CEO steps down or whatever it might be, right? I would argue that, and I'm not making any excuses for Volkswagen, what they did here was horrendous, and they should be punished thus. But I would imagine that the specific operational attributes of an emissions test is way, way, way below the pay grade of Michael Horn or any other, or some of the other execs in Volkswagen. What happened here, in my mind, is that some lower level peon fucked up in Volkswagen. And
the history of Volkswagen would lead me to believe otherwise, because the previous CEO, the one that stepped down originally, so the one thing that struck me as interesting, going back to kind of what Stuart said, is the CEO of Volkswagen US responded in a substantially different way than the actual CEO, who's German.
Big time.
Twice in a row. So the previous CEO who was in charge when this happened had a huge stake in the new diesel technology that that failed. But so I believe it probably did not come from the current guy who just stepped down, but the guy before him had a massive incentive for this program not to blow up, because it would have been billions and billions of dollars invested as an abject failure.
Well, I mean, the thing is, as well as anything like this, where this is going to have a marked impact on the public image of a company or whatever else, I can understand any CEO wanting to manage this in the most effective way to reduce the amount of impact that it's going to have. But the point I'm making here is, invariably, when a lot of these things happen, I think what happens is there is some screw up lower level down in the ranks, and then when it becomes a massive shitstorm, ultimately people are expecting the CEO to answer for it. And I'm not denying that. Look, at the end of the day, that's what being a CEO is.
That's why you get paid $160 million a year. Fuck that guy.
right?
Yeah, shut
the point
up,
I'm making
Stuart.
is that
Jeez.
obviously
Jono is
all
talking, and it's
roll-
really important that we listen to him right now. Jono,
It's obviously
go ahead.
Yes. I get what you're doing right now. It obviously all rolls up to the CEO, and that's where responsibility, that's where the buck stops. But in a company the size of VW, you can't necessarily have. The CEO can't necessarily enforce all decisions across the company. So while, yes, CEOs earn a ton of money and all the rest of it, I have a certain amount of sympathy for a lower level screw up that was maybe 2 levels of management below a CEO. The fact that the CEO then gets the slam down for it, I think in certain cases is kind of unfair. Like, imagine for the sake of argument that there was an engineer in Volkswagen that was responsible for this. His manager didn't do anything about it. That person's manager didn't do anything about it. And so you've kind of like got multiple layers of screw-ups before you even get to the CEO. The CEO may have said to the organization, we want to make sure we perform all tests accurately and within the letter of the law. But if people don't do that, then people expect the CEO's head to be on the chopping block.
Right.
In some situations,
points.
I do definitely agree with you. In this one, I don't think I do, just because an engine is such a complex, integral part of a car that one engineer could not do this. The amount of sensors and disparate systems involved means they definitely have a systemic issue in this case. In some cases, historically, I very much do agree with you.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Right, it's convenient. The CEO, Michael Horn, actually seems to agree with Jono here, because he said, the devices were put in place by a few rogue software engineers, right? So it's convenient that VW still make the microbus, because he took his engineers and threw them under it, right? That's a completely unreasonable thing to do.
Well, no, hang on a second, right? If they did actually have some engineers who were not working within the parameters of how the company asked them to work, then he has every right to do that. They fucked up.
Don't forget, Horn is the CEO
of
Volkswagen, the United States, which really has little to do with this actual issue.
Right.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
they don't do any of the
Distribution,
manufacturing. They don't do
marketing,
anything. It
and all
all
that,
happens in Germany. So I would say his response has been odd and I think damaging, because he hasn't seemed to take it seriously.
But importantly, if you're an engineer, right, somewhere down working on the engine, what's your motive to put in a ton of work to ensure that the car passes emissions tests? If the cars don't pass emissions test, you don't get a kicking.
No, but we don't know what the
so why would they even do it?
Yeah.
Whereas there is a huge motive for VW corporate to want their cars to go through emissions tests so they can go on sale.
There is. We don't know. I mean, we don't have enough information to determine that. There are probably many different motivating factors why people can break the rules at any rank in an organization. Yeah. The one thing I think we'd all agree on is if there was not to use a overused word, but if there was a conspiracy to defraud these tests, or if there was a systematic issue in the organization, or if it was handed down on high to do this, I think we'd all agree that the senior execs should absolutely face consequences. I just have a certain amount of sympathy towards, if you're the CEO, I don't know how big VW is, if you're the CEO of a large company and someone way further down with 2 levels of responsibility to stop this kind of stuff happening, and it happens, then what the hell can you do? I mean...
You're kind of right. It's like, what was the airline that posted pictures of a lady's hoo-hoo a while back? Was that United or Tita? Who was that? You remember that bunch of an airliner posted Twitter pictures that were pornographic last year?
Really? No, I didn't see that.
You're talking about I think it was United. They accidentally posted the picture of the woman with the plane inside her, right?
Right.
You talking about that thing?
Yes. So now in that instance, yeah, absolutely. The CEO of the airline had nothing to do with that, so that's not their fault.
Yes.
In this case, we're not talking about a bug that got through or someone accidentally posting a picture to Twitter they shouldn't have. We're talking about an actual feature. Now, it may not be a feature that they wanted people to know about, but it's an actual feature. It's a thing it does, and it's a thing it purposefully does. So then there's 2 possibilities there. One, it came down from above upper management or executives said, "Do this, mother effers," in German, or it started down below, and in which case it would have to be a vast conspiracy of software developers, hardware engineers, machinists, testing people, QA people, and whatnot, all coming together to do it without upper management knowing. And those are two options that totally could exist. But I think of it like this. It's a feature. Remember when Canonical got all that crap because of the Amazon the send back functionality in the Unity dashboard, right? Got a whole bunch of crap about it. It was a feature. It wasn't something that just slipped in accidentally. Now, when they got crap for it, this would be kind of like if Mark Shuttleworth got up there and went, whatever, this was all Stuart. Nobody knew this thing was going in. It was just a rogue Stuart throwing crap
but you're
into
comparing,
Unity.
You're comparing apples and oranges. First of all, the Amazon Dash was a feature.
Yeah.
This is not
so
a feature.
It's a feature. We just don't like it.
This is cheating. The other thing is that the Amazon Dash.
Right, but it's not a bug. To his point, they programmed
it
intentionally, making it a feature, not a bug. Right.
It's an intentional thing that they put special extra work into, taking time away from other things.
It's an illegal, shitty feature, but a feature nonetheless.
No, that's actually. Exactly. I completely agree.
It's not an oversight. They didn't go, "Oh man, we forgot to take out the thing which cheats on the tests." They built a thing and put it in.
Now, I agree
conspiracy
with you. I think the difference.
I love them. I think the difference with this, though, is that with the Amazon thing, as an example, that came as a strategic directive from the top, right?
Right.
Now, if the senior leadership team of VW said, "Do this," then I'm in complete agreement with you.
No. Well, here's the thing. Now, if Volkswagen, there's really only two ways to do it. Again, it has to come from above or it has to happen from the bottom. But in a car company, it would have to be a huge, vast conspiracy to make it work, to develop it.
Why do you say that?
Without letting upper management know.
Because too many different people would have to know about it. Two people just couldn't do this because of the way that the systems interact.
But we don't know that. No, we don't know how they operate tests. These are
but because of the way cars interact, multiple people would have had to know about it. It's not possible for just the software guy to do it. Just not.
No, I'm not denying that.
Totally
I think that you probably have to have multiple people within a specific team.
Right.
What I can imagine,
but across multiple departments.
But I can imagine whoever was running the team that took care of the tests within this part of the software, I can imagine that manager getting pressure from his or her manager, basically saying, "Look, we really need to.
Right.
We need to nail
it could
this."
very well be that the CEO didn't know,
the
and the head of R&D was under pressure to either hit his budget or to make good on a previous investment. I could see it being that, but it had to be someone, if not the CEO, then the director of R&D are the only two, which is right under the CEO.
It either had to come from above, or there had to be a concerted effort among a group of individuals spanning multiple disciplines and multiple organizations in order to not let the management know. One of the two has to happen. You couldn't have snuck in the Amazon functionality into the Unity Dash. Stuart could not have injected that code across multiple Ubuntu betas and got it into production without Mark Shuttleworth and everyone else in Canonical finding out about it.
Gratuitous slam on Ubuntu aside, because we're running a little bit long. And I think there is one more interesting thing here to reel it in back to a tech discussion, is that researchers are now saying that if not for the DMCA, this likely would have been found out earlier. Because because
isn't that interesting?
The anti-circumvention provision of the DMCA prevented anyone from even attempting to look at this. What do you guys think about that?
Holy moly, that's a whole other topic, guys.
Yeah,
we're surprised to hear.
17 minutes for this topic already, and I feel like I could ramble about that one for a good 25.
Well, why don't we end the segment on that interesting food for thought and carry it over to our favorite place, community.badvoltage.org.
System76's Serval Workstation is an absolute beast of a laptop, to a wonderfully ridiculous degree. Those lovely folks from Denver sent me a review unit with a desktop-class 4GHz i7 processor, 16 freaking gigs of DDR3 desktop RAM upgradable to 32 gigs, a 128 gig SSD with other options that can crank it up to 5 terabytes, and I kid you not, a 6 gigabyte GeForce GTX 970 for the GPU. Make no mistake, this is a desktop pretending to be a laptop, and a rather beefy desktop at that. All of that massive power definitely has some drawbacks, though, primarily in the form and the size of the Serval Workstation. It's about twice as thick as most laptops and weighs roughly 8 pounds. 8 pounds. Oh, and the power brick. Don't even get me started about the power brick. It is huge, which is probably why System76 labels this bad mamma jamma a workstation and not a laptop. And it definitely means this isn't exactly a toss it in your backpack to work on the plane sort of machine. No, this is a desktop, a portable one, with a 15.6-inch 1080p screen, 4 USB 3 ports, a gigabit Ethernet port, and even an eSATA port. As if that weren't desktop-y enough, they also include a full 10-key number pad on the awesome keyboard. The unit I received prices out at just a hair over $2,000 with configurations that can go higher or lower, and comes preloaded with Ubuntu, which works naturally right out of the box flawlessly. It should be noted that OpenSUSE also runs like an absolute dream on here. The verdict: if you run Linux and edit video or play lots of games, the System76 Serval is an absolute portable dream machine.
It's got
This sounds
a
like
10-key number pad. What's wrong with you? For goodness sake, it's the size of an aircraft carrier.
Dude, it is. It's glorious. It is absolutely glorious. Well, I mean, have you ever, when you get like a MacBook Pro or whatnot, right? The big size MacBook Pros and the big size laptops of the world that don't have a 10-key number pad kind of look like they're a little stupid. Like they have this just huge amount of just empty space to the sides that's not being used. But in this one, it's got this big ass number keypad right next to it, which is just awesome. I love
this. Is like getting a
keypad.
MacBook Pro and then putting 4 other MacBook Pros on top of it, right?
You know, that's it. This is even comparable to anything Apple makes or anything that I've seen Dell make. And Dell makes some pretty beefy laptops and Apple makes some pretty mediocre laptops. But this thing is insanity. It is so
It's not
thick.
comparable in terms of looks.
It is not.
It's uncomparable in every
It's not an
possible
attractive
way.
box.
You know what? It kind of is.
It's a badass box, but
It's attractive just in a different way. It's not sleek. It's not svelte. It doesn't got.
You
thin,
don't say,
crisp
is it not?
lines. It is so.
Is it
not.
really
In
8
fact,
pounds?
8 pounds, and that does not include the power brick, which I kid you not is the size of a small Volvo. It is huge, and it is. So I have no backpacks that this fits in.
Wow. So
None.
it really isn't a
I love
laptop.
it.
It's more of a
It's
portable.
not sleek.
Because I mean, that means it weighs almost as much as 3 MacBook Airs.
Yes, exactly. And it's more like, you remember those old like compact luggable computers from the 80s? This is more
Yeah.
like those. It's
But this is.
But it
It's
has some
awesome. This
is
seriously
like-
impressive
this is-
specs.
crazy.
But this is. I
impressive.
mean, the specs of this aren't the specs of this kind of similar to like a top end MacBook Pro.
No,
like,
not in the slightest. We're not, because to start
really?
with,
the top end
processor-
MacBook Pro's got 16 gigs of RAM. It's got
Yep.
an i7 CPU.
No, it's got a mobile.
500
It's
gigs
got a
of SS.
mobile i7 CPU. Very big difference. This is a desktop class 4 gigahertz i7 desktop processor. This is the same processor you would slap into like a big giant tower that you're building as a gaming rig at home. Also, the graphics card this thing has 6 gigs of RAM. It blows anything Apple makes out of the water.
It's got
that-
6 gigs of video memory.
That, to be
Yes.
clear, everything else, I was thinking. I mean, admittedly, I have a desktop computer, but I've got 16 gigs in it. I could ramp it up to 32 or to 64 if I
Oh,
want.
really? Yeah, because this laptop goes up to 32 gigs also.
Yeah. Yeah, the
By the way,
i7 is slightly better than the CPU
RAM,
that I got.
Not laptop RAM,
But-
desktop RAM.
Yeah,
This is much
which is
nicer
why
than
I've
the
got a
desktop I use.
computer. But
Same.
6 gigs of RAM on the video card is
nuts.
fucking stupid.
Dude, I'm going to be straight
No one
with you
needs
guys.
that much RAM.
So the video card in this is the GTX 970M, which is just it's a great video card for it. So I put on Steam. I loaded up okay, so I got it. I tested it out in Ubuntu. It ran great, blah, blah, blah. It was working fine. So I immediately formatted the whole thing and put OpenSUSE on it to really see how it ran. Ran great with that too. Put Steam on there and installed every Steam game that I own, and as well as just like a whole bunch of open source first person shooters and whatnot. Crank the resolution all the way up to 1080p. Crank the details to the highest settings. This thing never once in any game stuttered even the slightest bit. It was so choice, guys. It's like this is like the kind of thing. If I was still doing LAN parties with my buddies, I would want this because it is so much more badass than most people's desktop computers, and it is just the ultimate little gaming rig. It's insanity. It's pure insanity.
You know who this is designed for? So you know who this is designed for? This is designed for one Stuart Langridge, because you have a desktop and you decided on a desktop for lots of different reasons, right? And I know the one thing you don't like about this is because that it doesn't look sleek and sexy and all the rest of it. But this is basically a desktop machine that you can carry with you, so you don't have to carry a laptop that runs out of battery power when you unplug it.
Yes, no, I agree with that. I'm taking a certain amount of abuse here because my poor M1330 laptop doesn't work when you unplug it from the power.
I was going to say, to be fair to
fine.
Stuart, he can unplug it for up to
agree.
8 seconds at a time, and it's fine.
It's not 8 seconds. It lasts about 5 minutes. Shut up.
But it's got a 486DX2 processor in it, so it's okay.
Oh,
but
that's nice.
Putting that to one side for the moment, I did contemplate when I was looking at when I bought this desktop computer, buying one of these desktop class laptops, with a 17-inch screen. But then the times when I do want to go somewhere with it, I'm not going to be able to carry it because it weighs 5 kilos. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but
It's
I mean,
heavy.
it's not that big of a deal.
It's
the
not
weight
bad.
is. I mean, it's heavy, but
Well, the fact
it's
that
not
Bryan
like-
doesn't own a backpack that it will fit in is a little worrying.
Now, that's
a pretty solvable problem.
This isn't the kind of machine that's going to fit in the laptop slot of any backpack on the planet. It's just not going to. It literally.
You can fit this in like a rucksack, though.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah. You put this if you get a nice big backpack for going to school and you put it in the main compartment, it would fit. But it's
Can
not
you
gonna fit in the
hear
laptop
yourself? You have
bag.
to go hiking through the hills like Bear frigging Grylls or whatever his name is, with this huge backpack on your back, just so you can carry your stupid heavy laptop around the place.
It may be
right?
stupid heavy,
I mean,
but when
don't
you
get me
get
wrong.
to the
Don't get
top,
me wrong. I'm not buying one.
when you get to the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere, you're going to have a laptop with a gigabit Ethernet port and an eSATA port on it, and that you can't buy that sort of freedom.
I have
and
a question
happiness when you're on top of a
about
mountain.
its laptopness here, right? Yes, I agree. It's an extremely powerful machine, and that's really good.
Extremely.
What's the battery life like?
It's actually, it was better than I thought it would be. It was a couple hours. I never did the test where you
Couple hours.
Hang on. Did you say a couple of hours? Yeah, and that was better than you thought it was going to be?
Oh, come on.
Have you ever used a battery before?
No. Well, okay. This is a desktop,
not
right?
supposed to be.
So it really is a
this
portable
not-
desktop.
This is not a laptop. It's a desktop in a laptop shape. If you took your desktop and plugged in a battery on the back and turned it on and took it on the go, would you expect it to go all day long? No. That
No,
would
but
be
it
insanity.
probably wouldn't weigh 9 pounds then either.
This is probably true. But it's not meant for being a laptop. It's meant for you pick it
So
up.
then
if you
I
use
guess
it
I have a new
unplugged,
question,
it's
because you
maybe
said
an
you
hour or two,
were
and then
reviewing
plug it in.
a laptop, so I didn't think of this originally. I think this is actually kind of an interesting product then, in that it doesn't really fit into any current category. Do we think that a portable workstation is a market that is some people are looking for?
I think it's amazing.
Yes.
I'm going to be.
Yes,
I
definitely.
honestly think it's an amazing thing, and I don't just say that because I like the System76 guys. I mean, they're good guys,
Right.
but
They are.
if
Yeah,
this
they're
sucked, I
awesome
would still
guys,
tell them that this sucked and flip them off a little bit, and we'd still have a drink later. It's fine. But
I almost think
this-
they'd be well served to take this off the laptop page and market it as
See,
something different.
Put it, though?
Almost,
But that's
you
why
almost
they
make a
call
new
it a
category that is
workstation.
portable workstation or portable desktop or something, because
Yeah. It's
a portable desktop,
thinking of
basically.
it as
'Cause
a
it does sit
laptop,
on a
I don't think
desk.
does it justice, because it's not what it is.
It isn't. You're right.
And the thing is, I mean, I think the one thing that we've been kind of ragging on this thing a little bit, but System76, like you say, are great people, and they make generally really good gear. Like I've had 3 System76 laptops, and every one of them has been excellent.
Yeah.
And also, to me, like $2,000 for this is reasonable given what's in it.
Hell, you're getting a ton.
And it does actually, given the fact that it does have desktop RAM, and it's got a ludicrous amount of video memory, and it's got, a proper desktop CPU and all the rest of it. Given those constraints of size, and the System76 people are very clever, but I'm not sure they can impact physics outside of what physics can do. It actually, what they've accomplished there and the way it looks is actually pretty cool.
It's pretty good.
I think if we were judging this on, like Jeremy was saying, if we were judging this as a laptop, it would be quite different. But given the fact that this is basically a desktop that someone stood on and put a keyboard on top of, they've actually done a really nice job.
Essentially, I think what you've got is you've got a desktop computer where you don't have to faff about with wires to plug it in.
Kind of.
One of the things that I found interesting when I bought this desktop machine, I thought, great, buy a desktop machine, all done. And I thought, oh no, it doesn't have a webcam built in, doesn't have a microphone built in, doesn't have speakers built in. And you've got to go through and buy all of that stuff separately. Whereas if you buy a desktop class laptop or a portable workstation or whatever we call it, it's a complete self-contained unit which you can move somewhere else if you want to, but it's designed for you to put it on your computer desk and leave it there 364 days out of 365. It wouldn't surprise me if someone bought one of these and bought a laptop.
Right. No, that's... So,
or like
Jono's
a Chromebook or
waving
something
his
very
finger
portable, so...
in the air, indicating that we should wrap this up soon. But I wanted to actually change the topic and extend this by a couple of minutes. So I talked with one of their engineers, Jason, and kind of just to talk about this machine and how they kind of put it together, because again, like you guys, I took a look at it. It arrived, I opened the box. By the way, System76, if no one's ever bought anything from them, they have the greatest boxes. They have like all these like cool like pictures drawn on the inside of the box. They're fantastic. Anyway, so I opened it up and I was dumbfounded by how insanely huge this machine was. I looked at it, I'm like, this isn't a laptop, but it's not a desktop. It's like a whole different thing. So I talked with them and I sat down, we chatted for like a half hour or so, and a lot of the work that they put into this was Jason over at System76, I hope I'm getting the right person right, sorry if it's not Jason, was
Jason's
working
a good guy
on the engineering side of things for, I can't remember, I believe it was like 5-man month, something like that, to make sure that the firmware on the device worked as perfectly as possible for running Linux. So making sure that all of the firmware was updated properly and developed properly and fully tested. So throw on whatever Linux you want and things work really great right out of the box. They weren't just like developing like patches for Ubuntu and drivers for Ubuntu to work on the hardware. They were actually making sure that the firmware of the device itself was built in such a way that it was really easy for just Linux in general to work awesomely. And I thought that was fairly rad. System76 supports Ubuntu and that's it. And I'm not a huge Ubuntu guy. Like, I don't mind Ubuntu as much as I rag on it, but I like to run other distros most of the time. And everything I threw on this
thing, be able to do that.
Worked great. And the fact that I have on the go, I mean, I don't have it anymore. They made me send it back because turns out they weren't just giving me one, bastards. A desktop class 4 gigahertz i7 machine. And this one had a 120 gig SSD, but they offer an option up to 5 terabytes for the drive on storage. To have that in a machine that I can throw basically any distro I want on it, that sort of freedom is worth crazy. A lot to me. And I would love to see more manufacturers do that, because this was just phenomenal. On the flip side,
the other thing is
the Dell Linux laptops, in order to make it work right even in Ubuntu, you have to make sure you add the Dell repositories and add the additional packages and drivers to get it working right. It was a different approach, and I really like what System76 is doing.
Even then, it's not perfect. I was just about to make exactly that point, that it's really disappointing how the Dell Sputnik laptop, which is meant to be their kind of developer laptop, designed for Ubuntu, all this kind of thing, and it just isn't. Some of the hardware doesn't work. They've had firmware problems. They've had keyboard problems. They're taking it back and rolling out a new version. But this shows what happens when you actually do it right. Someone who's actually
Yes.
dedicated to Ubuntu rather
The
than
other
a
thing as
little
well is just before
Linux team inside a large company.
Yes.
And just before we wrap this up, I just want, I mean, we're all big fans of System76. We should share for people who don't know it that they sponsored our live show that we did in LA.
No, wait, let's
this
be
year.
clear. We allowed them to sponsor our show because we think they're cool, not we think they're cool because they sponsored the show.
Correct.
We thought they
Well,
were
a
cool
little bit
before
of
they
both.
sponsored the show, yes.
Yeah.
I think they're cool because they sponsored the show as well, personally. But the other thing which I just want, one of the things I dig about them, and then we'll wrap it up, is that I like the way that they're kind of changing the rules of how you build computers and sell them. I mean, first of all, they're very focused on Linux, obviously. I mean, they're 100% focused on Linux. But they're doing this thing called the Great Search for the System76 Superfan, which when I first heard about it, I thought they were looking for like a new hardware fan to put on their computers. But it turns out they're doing this thing where you can go out to Denver, where their office is, and you get like computers and stuff like that, and they engage a lot with the community. I think they're just good people. So
they're awesome people.
If you go out and get one of these things, it sounds like Brian likes it. We think it sounds cool, even though it's not a laptop; it's kind of a squash desktop. There's something about buying something from a company where you're actually supporting good people.
I was just going to say that
you'll-
this is the kind of company where if you're going to spend your hard-earned money on something, this is the kind of company you should spend it on because they give a shit. Yeah.
Word.
A little while ago in the Ubuntu app developer community, the Ubuntu phone app developer community, a few of us were kicking around a couple of ideas about how to license the apps that we build, right? Now, because we're Ubuntu people, we all like the idea of open source. It's a good idea. But equally, if you put out an app as open source and then you sell it for money, then what stops someone else just taking your open source app, releasing their own version of it, but not for money? Right? At that point, they've undercut your business model. And on the one hand, there's an argument that, well, that's what open source allows you to do. But on the other hand, that makes me think, well, maybe I just won't release any apps anymore. So the idea came about, what about the idea of a kind of a delayed GPL, or a delayed open source license? So you say, I'm going to release this, and then a year from now, or 6 months from now, or whatever, the code becomes open source. So that's built in as a thing. You're not saying, oh, I promise I'll release it as open source in the future, and then you have to actually remember to do so. You actually get a license, or kind of this dual license, so it's proprietary for 12 months after release, and then it's open source after that. So it ensures that the software ends up in open source, in the public domain, people can make use of it, but equally, it doesn't massively undercut your ability to make money from it in the first 6 months.
So do you think that's an actual legitimate concern? Because it seems to me historically, and I could be wrong here, that that's one of those things that people seem to worry about, but actually doesn't happen all that often.
Flappy Bird. Also, ask yourself if pick the top iPhone game at the moment, right? If they'd released that as open source at the same time, how many people do you think would just take that app, compile it themselves, and release it onto the App Store the same?
But the thing is, the company getting all the
Flappy Bird,
but the company getting all the press would be
times.
Angry Birds, so Angry Birds would still get the vast. Would technical people do it? Yes. Would 99% of people do it? No, because on the news they heard about Angry Birds, not about Flappy Birds.
Yeah, but there's no doubt that I'd say that if you only release your software as open source and you don't have another method of monetizing that in some way, then it's basically going to be very, very, very difficult to make money. And I'd say the example of that is Canonical. Is that Canonical stepped out from day one and said, everything that we do will be free and open source. Ubuntu will always remain open source, and there will no be distinction of an enterprise edition and a community edition. And to be fair to Canonical and Mark Shuttleworth, they've stuck to their guns there, but it's made it very, very difficult to drive revenue from there. Now, you look at alternatives where people release something that's open source, and then they have services that plug into it, such as Android or whatever else. then they can drive revenue from it. So I think the notion of this license is
monetizing
kind of a cool
infrastructure
idea.
pieces is always different than monetizing apps, though. I mean, realistically, and I think Stuart can attest to this, having released having released an app to the App Store that made the New York Times, actually getting paid a market rate for investing and building an app, the chances of that happening are infinitesimal at best.
Small.
Open source aside.
Small. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is an even larger point. If you're building a top flight mobile app, say you want to build Monument Valley or Alphabet or something like that, in order for it to be that good, in order for it to get to the top, with a few occasional exceptions, 2048 did really well, for instance, but that was a bolt out of the blue. Most of them, you're talking about having a team of 4 or 5 software engineers, a marketing person investing $500,000, so on and so forth. And anyone who's invested $500,000 is pretty loath to just say, and here's the code on GitHub on day one, because importantly, unless you've also taken out a trademark on the name of your game, there's nothing stopping me uploading a game called Monument Valley. Just the same thing in the store.
Well, if you're going to invest that amount of money, surely you would have copyright and trademark stuff pretty locked down.
Right, exactly. But I'm not really here thinking of people doing that. I'm thinking more of people like us. You know, Brian releasing Linux Tycoon or whatever. Okay. With
I did.
Or me releasing Riddling or a bunch of apps, that sort of app.
So in that case, I think I
do have...
I was going to say I have 2 questions, but I'll let Jono go first.
I was just going to say there is a small data point that kind of feeds into it. Is that when we launched the Global Learning X Prize as part of the rules of the competition, we basically said, for the 3-year development testing period of building your entries, you can make it open source if you want, or you can have it be closed source. But then the top 5 winners have to open source their code at the end, which is kind of the same principle.
Yeah, sure. Same idea.
And one of the things that was interesting was that from the feedback that I've seen, admittedly limited because there's like 200 teams participating, I certainly haven't talked to all of them, is that they were very attracted to that notion. This is different because it's a more competitive environment, obviously, but the notion that it's open source later on was very attractive to them because they felt like they could build a competitive advantage, that they could build something interesting, that they could derive value from it first, and then they can essentially offset the potential risks of it being open source.
But equally, you are building something which ends up in the commons, which ends up with a community being built around it.
Well, this is not really a new idea, right? ID Software has been doing this for, as you would say, donkey's years.
Yeah.
But so I have 2. I was kind of playing. I was kind of playing devil's advocate at the beginning because I do think this is an interesting idea. But I guess my 2 questions are: it would seem to me, if you realistically wanted to do this, let's say you say to pick a random time frame and a random license, everything was GPL v3 after 6 months. You are obviously going to need any contributors in your community to sign a CLA, and I think the open source community has already proven that's going to be a huge stumbling block to actually having a vibrant community.
Now, bear with me. I'm in the model that's in my head. There are no contributions while it's closed source. I mean, the code might be visible,
but it's developed in-house in a proprietary closed way and then released later. That's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's my thought. The idea is not to build a community who will sign the CLA and contribute to the proprietary version while it's the proprietary version.
And then what about security?
Once it goes open source...
What about security fixes? Because if someone is, let's say 6 months later, the code is open and distros start rolling your 6-month-old code into their repos, and then there's a security issue, do they not get the fix for 6 months?
Maybe. How is this any different to security fixes for proprietary?
I'm not following.
No, I see what he's saying. If there's a delay, like if the idea that you're always
they wouldn't be able to access the open source code for 6 months.
Right. Yes. With the idea exactly as I've presented it, if every line of code I write doesn't become open source for 6 months,
right,
then if I write a security fix today, people packaging the open source version don't get it.
And where to answer your question, John, where that differs from proprietary software is the proprietary software doesn't have the 6 months lag in open source, so they would just release a new version.
Right.
Yeah.
I see.
So yes, I am assuming that you'd need some way of saying, here is a line of code which is not under the license or whatever. Yeah. Yes. Agreed. I hadn't particularly thought of that, but you're right.
Having a built-in delay sucks. I hate that idea. I hate it, Stuart. I hate that you brought it up even. This sucks.
If it gets more open source out into the world, I think it's an interesting idea.
No, it's not an interesting idea.
Clearly, Bryan does not agree.
I have two completely different tangents we need to go down. The first is I actually don't see this as an actual issue. So I started out doing closed source software. That's how I put food on the table, right? I don't do any software development anymore because I found it boring after a while, and I like being stupid much, much better than making software. But I did make several attempts, several failed spectacular attempts at trying to open source my closed source code, right? They failed one after another. The one system that worked phenomenally well for me was simply declaring everything open source, making it open source, and selling it as if it weren't. And just selling shareware, just like you do in the old days in the 1980s. It's like I'm selling Wolfenstein, except, there's code on the website too. And that worked just as well, and if not a little bit better than selling closed source stuff. Did anyone fork my code? Yes, but nobody set up shop to go somewhere else and sell it. Now, if I was a huge Angry Bird size company, would other people do that a whole bunch? Yeah, of course they would. But again, just as Jono said earlier, people are going to be searching for, whatever the big name is. And if I did a good job and my trademark name was the big name, that's where I'd get the most of the sales anyway. So I don't see the issue as being an actual issue. The other flip side is, in practice, one of the good benefits of having the source code out there and being under a license like the GPL is it makes things somewhat future-proof, right? If the company goes away or the person goes away, the software can continue to live. It can be sitting in a repo somewhere. Yeah. What happens if Stuart Langridge dies of the diabetes or kidney disease? I don't know why I picked diabetes. Mostly because I like to say it like diabetes.
Just because of Wilford Brimley, basically.
Yeah, it's Wilford Brimley that does it for me. What if Stuart dies because he's thinking about Wilford Brimley and then accidentally gets hit by a bus before he ever gets to open source the code? Well, then the whole license was pointless in the first place. You have to build like a whole infrastructure where there's like source code escrow companies that could hold code for a certain amount of time.
I don't necessarily think so. That point came up in the discussion. And the way I'd solve that is I'd put the code on GitHub on day one. It would just say under a proprietary license. So anyone who says, I'm going to package this up and sell it as my own is explicitly breaking the license. They're not doing something they're allowed to do.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh,
you could have a private repo as well.
You could have, if the idea took off, then you can absolutely imagine GitHub providing a thing where you say, this is under this license. Right. They say, when does the license time out? You go this day, and then they automatically flip it from a private to a public repo or something.
Right.
But my assumption was you publish the code. I don't even think it was me who suggested this in the discussion. It might have been Mike Terry, or Ted Gould, maybe. But you publish the code, but it's got
Fred.
Proprietary license.
Maybe Bob.
Whatever, So, so the code's out there. So if I do get struck by lightning or whatever, the code's still there, and people can legally use it.
You're right. That is a way to do it. I still don't. Here's the thing with this. I love the notions of baby steps towards getting companies to be open source. I love the notion of moving companies, even if it's bit by bit, towards open source. All of that's great. I want them to move to free and open source. That's awesome. But this doesn't feel like a baby step so much as it's not even a halfway. It's just a combination of the two ideas, really. It's a delayed open source combination Frankenstein closed source open source system that I don't know that it really is a stepping stone to I think always being open source.
I think it is because I can imagine a company like Microsoft, right, who are increasingly doing more and more good things in the world of open source. And you can imagine them building maybe a developer framework or a product or something, right? And them saying, we believe in openness, we believe in open source, and in 6 months' time, this will be open. You can absolutely imagine that a lot of people who would be potentially interested in that specific technology, but maybe put off if the fact that it was proprietary, would they would evaluate it in situations where they ordinarily wouldn't. Because I think a lot of companies want to move towards open source because they can fix bugs if they have them locally. They're not relying on the vendor to fix them necessarily.
This you're going to end up with two
companies.
trees then. You're going to end up with two trees. If you have a community that's submitting patches back, you can never substantially change the architecture of your system that's currently closed.
I'm not talking about
you don't
submitting
get the community aspect of it. You don't. You don't get the community support.
I would agree with that. I think part of the model in my head for this is you want to sell a thing now.
Yeah.
It's got a relatively short shelf life. After that relatively short shelf life, you'll probably get bored with it. You won't continue to maintain it. It will stay as an artifact as it is.
Yeah.
But if other people want to take it and build on it, do something new and interesting with it, great. You might even participate in that community yourself, but you probably won't see it as a continual revenue.
So this is something aimed more at games and things like that, not at apps.
That's the kind of, as I say, the model that it came about from was a one for apps on the phone, where yes, some of them are very long-standing, continue to sell over and over again, continue to be maintained. But a lot of them, you build it, it's done, and then you go, okay, there it is, and then you move on to the next app. So it stays there, and people can still use it if they want to, but you're not continually maintaining it and upgrading it.
I think we need to open this up. I think. Go ahead, Jono. You can say one more thing. Then I'm just going to cut you off. I'm going to shut you down,
to wrap up. That's fine. I was just going to say, I can imagine this being of most interest for people like Bryan. Like, Bryan, you publicize quite a lot about, what's the best way in which you could manage the things that you'd built, your games and books and whatever else. And I can imagine for smaller software development houses who don't have big marketing departments and all the rest of it, this being actually a really nice way of kind of bumping up some revenue first, but then getting it out there afterwards.
That's kind of the idea. It's for people who want to make a bit of money, aren't sure that would work if the code's on GitHub, but do want to contribute it to the commons without having to remember to do so 12 months from now. There are obviously you need some kind of law person to get involved and work out the details of how you actually put code under this license and what it looks like and whether it's compatible with the GPL and whether it should be 6 months and then MIT or whatever. I wasn't in a mood to bug about with the details. It's the concept that I think is interesting.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right. First, I want to hear what everyone thinks about changing the name of lawyers and attorneys to law person. If everyone thinks that would be cool to put on a sign, talk to us at community.badvoltage.org. But also, I am kind of interested in what people think of this. I personally have some reservations on it just based on my past experiences and my random fanaticism at this point in my life. But Stuart does have kind of a point that it's kind of attractive. I can see it being attractive to some people. So go to the community, talk about it. I would love to hear what people have to say. And if you could find a way to back me up on this, that would be fantastic too.
And also, one final question for the community as they weigh in: would you consider this a free software license or not?
No. Answer no.
Think about it.
Bang-a-ring.
For this show's Hack Voltage, imagine you're using an application or you're writing a bit of code and you want to send a message such as a status update or a log entry to somebody's phone via a text message, and you're trying to figure out exactly how you do that. Well, it turns out that it's dead simple because a lot of telcos provide an email address that you can send a message to, and it will forward it on to that particular phone. Now, the way this typically works is that the email address is the phone number at some kind of address. So, for example, in the US for AT&T, it will be the phone number at txt.att.net. For T-Mobile, it's the phone number at tmomail.net. For Sprint, it's the phone number at messaging.sprintpcs.com. And for Verizon, it's the phone number at vtext.com. Now, in the UK, for those of you on O2, it's the phone number at o2imail.co.uk. In Ireland, for those of you on Meteor, it will be the phone number at mymeteor.ie. And of course, we can't complete this segment without referencing Mobility Bermuda, and that's the phone number at ml.bm.
And that brings us to the end of another groundbreaking episode of Bad Voltage. I would like to stop for a second and talk about the recent events in Germany. Of course, I'm talking about Bad Voltage Live in Fulda, Germany, which before Bad Voltage Live, I did not know was a real place. So this was a very eye-opening geographically thing for me. I did not get to be there, but I did watch the entire thing on a very, very small, low-resolution stream on my laptop where I got to participate remotely, controlling a robot that was dressed as a little German girl. And I have to say, gentlemen, you rocked that show. Nice.
And for those of you who didn't see it, by the way, he did run the robot directly into a wall and knock it over.
I did.
He did.
So there's that.
And I felt
I'm sad we didn't get that.
So at the end, so for those of you who have not seen it yet, go to our YouTube channel, go to whatever, find it and watch it. At the very end there's this little one of those telepresence robots. It goes up and it goes down, and I can make it go up and down, and I can kind of wheel it around. But if you make it all the way up, if you make it go as high as it goes, it rolls so crazy slow. It just slows all the way down. And I did not realize how slow it would be if I made it as high as it would go, which of course I did because I made the whole room watch me as I slowly raised myself up, because why not? I have a bunch of Germans watching me. That's what I'm going to do. So as I'm leaving...
Eat my rubber.
As I'm leaving, I'm like, okay, I had maybe 3 or 4 little one-liners to say as I was like, going to say a few little cute things, eat my dust. I knew I was going to go slow, so I thought I had enough. I was halfway out the hall, or halfway down the little aisle there, still with half of the way to go, and I had nothing left to say. And I'm like, this guy's just not moving. I'm like, okay, I gotta say something in order to kill this dead time. And it was going so slow. I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna run this into the back wall because that'll be funny, right? That's funny. I had no idea the robot was gonna fall over. It fell over with this catastrophic clunk, and on my side,
big chunk.
I was going to say, I suspect Taurus thought it was less funny.
I thought it had shattered. Like, I heard, I swear to God, breaking noises. And I freaked out.
There was a moment where I thought it was probably busted.
This expensive robot. It was awesome.
We bust the robot.
So
there was a moment where Taurus said... I was just going to say, there was a moment earlier in the day when Taurus was like, just be careful with the robot.
Yes, he absolutely did. And I was going to say, on the... While we're talking about Taurus, I think... We should all take this time to thank Taurus and the Open NMS guys, Ronnie and Dustin. The whole group was absolutely awesome and treated us better than they probably should have, to be honest.
It was
the 3 of us that were there.
Dustin was really helpful, AV. Jesse helped us out throughout the show.
Yeah, Jesse as well,
Ronnie helped us for the whole entire time we were there, and Taurus is just excellent. Nicest man in open source.
Fulda was a pretty nice city, it turns out, for as much as some people took the piss out of it beforehand.
Admittedly, we were quite unfair to Fulda before we went to Germany.
Well, none of us
that's Fabian Schnurzel's.
Oh yeah,
that's Fabian Schnitzel, whatever his name is. That's his fault though, because he was referring to it as the Wolverhampton of Germany, which we unwittingly bought into. And it's actually it's a beautiful little place.
Yeah,
too many wasps. I need to get rid of the wasp problem.
There was some wasp. And I would say, if you haven't watched the video yet, it is worth it for the 60 seconds alone of a SUSE employee absolutely, utterly blasting Jono for no other reason than to win a tablet.
The only Ken Weimer.
He went on an absolute rant that was, I would say, epic.
That was enjoyable.
It was quite unfair.
Now that I've seen the translation, even funnier.
We've had it translated twice on the forums. That was excellent. Joe Ball did it.
Is it translated on the forums?
That was brilliant. Yeah.
It absolutely is.
It's on the forum, yeah.
Awesome.
And to say, like Jeremy said, that they treated us well while we were over there, I mean, that is an understatement in the sense of, everything that we needed in terms of the show, from the AV to, I mean, we had 3 screens on this show, to the audio requirements. Like, the show that we did was actually quite elaborate when it came to the AV, but not just that. All the food that they showered on us, and they picked us up from the train station. Like, we were treated really quite unnecessarily well that week, and it was a really good time. And what was really nice, I thought, was the fact that we got to go and check out what the Fulda folks do, what the local places that they are. We got the real German experience over there.
We got to see the Eck.
And that was the coolest. I think that was the coolest element.
We did get to go to the Eck.
Yeah. There was quite a lot of drinking.
There was quite a lot of drinking, which Robo Bryan could not participate in.
We did get to see a voice-controlled coffee machine in the office as well, so it was a pretty well-rounded trip, I think.
I'm going to have to get that up on
the video of it, right?
YouTube channel. Yeah, I'm going to stick that on the... That was really cool. And just super nice people. So, Taurus, everyone over there, thank you so much. We had an absolute blast. And
absolutely. We appreciate it.
We will hopefully be announcing our next live show quite soon. We can't share it quite yet, but we are going to be doing another live show, and stay tuned, and we hope to see you there as well.
Plans are afoot, yes.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, this is becoming a thing.
Seems like it is.
What, that we have a show we can't talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, so is there anything else that we need to...
No, I think we're good. Welcome back to the fold, to the normal behaviour. We spent...
welcome back to recorded voltage.
Yeah, recorded voltage, not live voltage. Out tomorrow voltage, we'll call it.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Okay.
You should get that.
It sounds like I should.
All right, so we'll see you folks next time.
Fitting end to show 52 there.
There were a few of us in the Ubuntu phone app developer community having a discussion. And one of the things that came up is this. Well, we all like releasing stuff as open source, right? That's a good idea. Excuse me. Sorry.
No problem, man. Take your time. Sneeze. If you need to grab a tissue and just blow your schnoz.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start that again. Is what I'm going to do.
I know you're not. This is included.
Yeah, this is all part of it. You might as well just keep going.
Once again.
Don't stop recording. Don't stop recording.
Don't stop. I'm still recording.
You don't have to stop recording. I just expect you to cut this out.
This is all content, man. This is gold.
This is great. This is why the listeners listen.
It is silver at best.
Well, at least it's some kind of precious metal. Keep going, Stuart.
It's QVC, cubic zirconia.